Hello again, everybody. Peter Mortimer here, and today I would like to give you a short talk on the history of Govan. And Govan is certainly one of the most ancient parts in and around Glasgow. We're going to start by looking at a place called Doomsday Hill. Sounds a bit ominous, doesn't it? It's Doomsday Hill, and this was an ancient settlement in Govan. And on the left-hand side, you can see the pencil drawing showing Doomsday Hill. Doomsday Hill is the part on the right, bottom right-hand corner, and it was a moot hill, what was known back in the days as a moot hill. And a moot hill was a place where people would gather to discuss the issues and the politics of the day. And it's from that word that we get the phrase, oh, that's a moot point. In other words, it's a point of discussion. And Doomsday Hill was situated just on the banks of the Clyde at Govan, and it was adjacent to what was to become the site of Govan Parish Church. Some of you may remember Doomsday Hill from the television programme The Time Team. Back in 1996, they carried out a dig at Doomsday Hill and at Govan Old Parish. And you can probably catch that on YouTube or BBC Catch-Up, Channel 4 Catch-Up. It's certainly worth seeking out. This is the Govan Old Parish, and it's quite an old church. It's been rebuilt a couple of times, but the actual parish is quite ancient. The church is quite well known for what's known as the hog-backed stones. These were ancient stones that existed in Govan, and they've been brought inside now, and they are available to view on tours of Govan Old Parish. Certainly worth a visit if you're down that way. Govan, as a settlement, had a number of estates scattered around its periphery. And some of these estates, I'm sure you will recognise the names to the modern day. The first one on the left there is the Shield Hall estate, lay slightly to the west of Govan and was close to the vicinity of what was to become the cooperative factories down at the far end of Govan. And on the right is Linthouse estate. And of course, Linthouse forms the western boundary of Govan as we kind of know it today. Both of these mansion houses, as I say, encapsulated large estates of the surrounding ground. A couple of others that was in the area, and one again, I'm sure you'll recognise the name, is Craigton, the Craigton estate to the southwest of Govan. Craigton Road is still a thoroughfare running through the district, and Craigton Industrial Estate, slightly over towards Paisley Road West, is a reminder of the Craigton name. And slightly further east, southeast of Govan, was the Cessnock estate. And Cessnock, of course, is probably best recognised today as the names of one of the stations on the Glasgow Underground. So these were 4 estates dotted around the corners, or the edges, I should say, of Govan, and were a key part of its history in the past. Govan was indeed a borough in its own right, and it existed from 1864 through to 1912. And at one time, Govan was the 5th largest town in Scotland. It had a population of around 90,000 people. Govan was to become part of Glasgow in a big annexation move by Glasgow in 1912 when it swallowed up Govan, Partick and a few other areas. And many Govan people at the time really thought that Glasgow should come under Govan, because Govan is very ancient, as we saw earlier from Doomsday Hill and the old Govan Parish Church. Now, the Govan coat of arms on the left is still to the fore today. You'll still see examples of it around the Govan area, and it was represented by the shipbuilder and the engineer, and the motto Nil sine labore, nothing without labour, which emphasises the hard-working ethics of the people and the borough of Govan. On the right-hand side was the former borough chambers of Govan, and that was positioned in Orkney Street, and we'll see a wee bit more of that just in a minute or so. Here we have 2 images of the Govan Town Hall. Govan Town Hall stands at the corner of Somerton Road and Govan Road, just at the corner where the docks take a turn round there. And it was built as the town hall for Govan, but Govan actually had the distinction of having two town halls. There was another town hall over at Langlands Road, but the main town hall was this fine example, and it was a beautiful building, quite enormous inside. There are some photographs you can have a look at online of the inside of Govan Town Hall, and it is a beautiful building inside. And you see that on the left is the sort of postcard image of the day with the horse-drawn trams and whatnot. And you can see that this has been coloured. This would have been coloured by hand, almost painted. And you'll see some examples of these old postcards quite readily on the internet. On the right-hand side, we've got a black and white image of the Govan Town Hall from about 1980s or thereabouts. And the building is still standing to this day and is in fine shape. On the left is the Govan Police Station at Orkney Street, and you might recognise that because it was the former Borough Chambers building that we looked at a few seconds ago. And the police station, by the time I took this photograph, was up for sale. The building was getting sold. But importantly, the building acted as the police station for the Govan area, and at the rear of the building is a cell block, and you see the cell block there on the photo on the right. And the cell block, believe it or not, is now in use as a business centre. The cells have been turned into little offices that people can come in and rent either on a short or medium-term lease, and it's quite a vibrant place. It also has the claim that Rudolf Hess, who was one of Hitler's deputies, flew over to the UK to broker a peace, and he crash landed up at Eaglesham outside East Kilbride as we know it today, and he was arrested and taken to Orkney Street Police Station, or the Govan Police Station. The purpose of his visit to Scotland was to try to meet the Duke of Hamilton, who he had met back in the Olympics at Berlin in 1938, to try and broker a peace. But of course, Hess ended up in Spandau prison in Germany and died a number of years ago. But that's Govan Police Station's little claim to fame. Rudolf Hess was once a cellmate in there. Just along from the Borough Chambers was the fire station. And here we see on the left a beautiful photograph of an old functioning fire station with the old trucks, ladders at the top, ready to go and attend the fire. And the station still exists to this day. And if you look at the colour photograph on the right, this is just at the corner of Orkney Street. And by now, the station has been painted a slightly different colour, a slightly beige colour. There's a door there and 4 windows, and it's now houses. But you can, without doubt, you can make out the shape of the former fire station when it was in its heyday. Interestingly, the modern fire station for Govan is just across the street from where this image was taken. Like Glasgow, Govan has a history of the weaving trade, and in Govan there was a large silk mill down on the banks of the Clyde, which you can see on the photograph, and this belonged to Pollock and Company, and this was quite a large building, and it specialised in very fine weaving of silk. And on the right, you see a trade union banner of the Govan Weavers, instituted in 1758. So there's a long history of weaving on the banks of Govan. But weaving wasn't to be the only trade that Govan was to become famous for. And of course, that trade that Govan is most associated with is shipbuilding. And shipbuilding began on the Clyde down at Govan with John Elder, who built the yard down there. And this is an aerial shot of the Fairfields yard. And you can see the size. On the left-hand side, you see the size of the shipyard. It was an enormous place with the basins for the ships and the slipways to launch the boats. And on the right-hand side, we have the offices of Fairfield and Company. And these offices on Govan Road are still standing to this day and still in use. And it's a very, very nice building. And I think you can you make arrangements to go in and have a look at it. And it's certainly worth doing. Nice place. Just further along the river at Linthouse was the yard of Alexander Stephen and Company. Stephen started to build ships up in Arbroath on the east coast of Scotland and moved to Glasgow down to the Clyde because that's where the action was, that's where the big money was to be made. So Alexander Stephen bought land along at Linthouse and set up his shipyard. Unfortunately, the Alexander Stephen name is long associated with a dreadful disaster that happened from the slipway. They were about to launch a boat called the Daphne, and as it went down the slipway, still lots of workers were working on board, and when it reached the water, it capsized and tipped over, and over 100 lives were lost. And there's a memorial to the Daphne in the Elder Park in Govan. As well as shipbuilding, Govan became a centre for ship repair, and this was a very lucrative trade. And here we have on the left-hand side an aerial photograph of the Govan engraving docks. And you can see they take up quite an acreage just off Govan Road there. And it was here that ships would be brought into the dry docks. The dry docks would be drained, the ships would be propped on either side, and then the work would start to repair the ship, paint the ship, descale it. Whatever work had to be done would be carried out at the graving docks. And the graving docks here, they came into prominence in the film industry just a couple of years ago when they were used as a backdrop to the World War I drama 1917. On the right-hand side, you can see a postcard of the graving docks at Govan with a vessel in the graving dock. You see it sitting on the base of the dock. It's propped on either side to stop it tipping over, and this would give the ship repair workers access to the hull of the ship to carry out the necessary repairs. Govan is also the home of the Southern General Hospital, and the Southern General Hospital started off as the Mary Flats Poorhouse and was then brought into being as a hospital, and it was called the Southern General. The local parlance for it was the Suffering General, so many Glaswegians still call it that. And of course, I'm sure you're aware that a few years ago, the whole site was developed. The main building of the old hospital that you see on the left-hand side is still standing, the old main building. But it was all rebuilt a few years ago and is now the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. And it is a facility par excellence that even has a helicopter pad on the roof for patients to be brought quickly to the hospital for treatment. They can avoid all the traffic, or coming from the Highlands or the Islands, they'll travel right in and land on the roof at the Queen Elizabeth. And it's a very important part of healthcare in the city of Glasgow. Education in Govan in the early days, before the Education Act, there were schools who provided education for children, and they were called subscription schools. And on the left's a photograph of the Govan Cross subscription school, and these were schools where kids would pay a penny. Sometimes they were called the penny schools, and they would receive lessons. After 1873, it was mandated that children had to be educated by the authorities. And on the right, we see an example that comes into play just before that, and this was the Hills Trust. And this was Abraham Hill, who was a merchant, a businessman in Govan, and he set up the Hills Trust School, and it was to favour children whose surname was Hill. And this was a facility for them. But the children who were neither at the subscription school because they couldn't afford it, or who had a surname Hill, after 1873 started to attend local authority schools. And here's a couple of examples. In the second half of the 19th century, there was a massive school building project in Glasgow and Govan to build schools, and these are two examples. The Elder Park School, as you can see from the stonework, perhaps it's 1898, and this was a primary school. And then further over towards Craigton, where we spoke about Craigton Estate earlier, stood Craigton Primary School at Moriarty Street, and that's still standing also. For senior education, the jewel in the crown in Govan was undoubtedly the Govan High School. It was a school with a great educational reputation, and it saw many pupils go through its books, people like Alex Ferguson on the right. Also, it had Bill Martin. Bill Martin was the guy who wrote Puppet on a String, which was the Eurovision song winner back in the 60s. He wrote many, many hits. And these were former pupils of the illustrious Govan High School. It went on fire in the mid-60s and was severely damaged. So there we have Govan High School, many great famous pupils there, and just ordinary people who enjoyed a good education. Govan had, like most districts, it had its own library, And Govan's library was built when it was still a borough, and the money largely came from the Elder family, John Elder, the shipbuilder. And here we see a photograph of the Elder Park Library, which is still in use today and is the most beautiful building, both inside and out. On the right-hand side, we see a photograph of the opening of the Elder Park Library with the Lord Provost, and seated next to him, the man you see with a little skull cap and grey beard, that is Andrew Carnegie. Now, Andrew Carnegie was born in Dunfermline, and he emigrated via Glasgow to America, where he founded a steel company, and he became an extremely wealthy man. He gave a lot of money away worldwide for the building of libraries, and here he is attending Elder Park Library at its opening. Most of the money for this was, however, donated by Isabella Elder, the wife and widow of John Elder, the shipbuilder. Part of the municipal input was to build public baths and washhouses in the greater Glasgow area, and Govan went for that also. And here we see the inside of a steamy with the boilers where the women could wash their laundry. And sadly, we're looking at Har Hill Street on the right-hand side, the Govan Baths, and that's it during demolition. It sadly has been demolished and is no more. But there was also a steamy over at Ibrox at Flinders Street. This building on the left, everybody in Govan will know it because it's right at the cross, and it was built as the Cardinal Hall, and it was actually built as a temperance hall, and the temperance movement was for people who would abstain from alcoholic drink. And it's quite paradoxical insofar as the ground floor is now occupied by Brechin's Public House. On the gable of the Cardinal Hall, there is a little folly, and that's on the right-hand side. And it's a cat, and this cat apparently was a favourite in the district of Govan because it ate all the rats and did away with them, so it was much favoured. So it was felt that it should be recognised, and it was recognised in stonework. One of the managing directors of the Fairfield Ship Company was William Pearce, and Pearce was again a benefactor to the Govan district. And on the left-hand side, you see the Pearce Institute, but just closest to the camera, excuse me, closest to the camera is a statue of William Pearce, which is sometimes referred to as the Black Man because of the colour of the statue. And in the background, we've got the Pearce Institute, which has kind of been like the community centre for the Govan area. All sorts of activities take place there, still open to this day, still got people coming and going daily and providing a very useful facility for the Govan area. And inside it, we see the main hall in the Pearce Institute, and it's got a stage, and it's almost theatrical in its appearance, but it's well used and recently underwent a refurbishment. Just adjacent to the Pearce Hall is the YMCA building, which we're looking at on the left. And this is the building right on the corner. It's a 4-storey high tenement, which is not unique, but quite unusual in Glasgow. And on the first floor of the tenement is, of course, the obligatory dentist surgery. Lots of dentists chose the first floor of a tenement for their treatment rooms. And this one is now called Water Row Dental Practice, and it's been there for quite some time. But the YMCA building, as the name would suggest, was built by Young Men's Christian Association as a facility, and that's on just slightly to the right there, the YMCA building. And it was used by members of the Christian Association, where they could meet, where they could participate in activities, and it was well used, and it's still there. It's all been stone cleaned, as you see. Diagonally across on the opposite side of Govan Road is St Anthony's RC Church, and it's built in quite an Italianate style. And again, you can see some repair work getting carried out in the photograph, which was taken not all that long ago. Just off Govan Cross, there is a very ancient track down to the water, and it's called Water Row. It takes you from Govan Cross down to the River Clyde, the banks of the Clyde. On the left, you can see a really early photograph of Govan, Water Row at Govan, and you can see the little cottages all the way down to the river bank with the crow step gables, and in the background you can see some activity where a ship appears to be getting built in the slips. And over on the right hand side is pretty much the same view, but a photograph in this instance. And of course it was from here that the Govan ferry departed over to the opposite bank, and that was in use up until maybe the mid 1960s or thereabouts. There is a ferry sometimes still operates going from Govan across to the Museum of Transport, although it's not a permanent feature. Entertainment in Govan. For the Govanites, one of the places that certainly would attract them back in the day was the Lyceum Theatre. And you see the photograph on the left there of the Lyceum, a quite beautiful building. You can see the most amazing turrets on the building. And this was a theatre at the start of the variety show version. Theatres in Glasgow, a greater Glasgow area, absolutely boomed in the 1880s, 1890s onwards, as people began to go out and enjoy entertainment in palaces of entertainment, and so to speak. And the Lyceum at Govan was one such place. As the theatre market began to reduce, the Lyceum was no longer economic and it was demolished, and it was replaced in the 1930s by the Lyceum Cinema, which is the photo on the right. And that's very much got shades of Art Deco, and it was quite a big picture hall, as you can see, and is still standing to this day, but it's certainly not in use as a theatre. Other theatres, other cinemas, sorry, in the area was the Vogue over at Langlands Road, and you can see a big corner site. It's got the canopy, again, quite 1930s in its style, and that unfortunately has gone, as most district cinemas in Glasgow have. The Vogue has disappeared and it's now the site of a block of flats. And to the right is the Plaza Cinema, which was on Govan Road near to Govan Cross, and that's now the site of the bus station at Govan. But just to the right of the plaza where the policeman's standing, that was the Govan sidings. That's where the railway goods yard was in Govan, long since gone. Other attractions for entertainment in Govan, back in the 1980s, there was two big productions carried out at Harland and Wolff's shed on Govan Road. One of them was, on the left, you'll see The Big Picnic, which was a play about the First World War, and the other on the right was The Ship, about the shipbuilding industry. And both of these plays played to big crowds and to critical acclaim. They were well received. In fact, The Big Picnic, I think, appeared as a television production. Leisure time in Govan could be used by the locals by a stroll in Elder Park. And Elder Park, as you maybe guessed, was sponsored by the Elder family. Again, Isabella Elder, a quite amazing woman, and the Elder family subsidised and bought the Elder Park. And here you see some views of it. These are old postcard views, which was they were in vogue at the time, and you can see it's a big, bright, open space. And that would be somewhere good to go for families and children in particular who lived in grimy tenements, and perhaps their father worked in a shipyard, and it was a tough old life. But they could escape that by a stroll in the Elder Park. And on the right-hand side, you see a postcard, another one of these colour painted postcards of the bandstands and music in parks back in the 1890s and into the new century was incredibly well supported and very, very popular. Elder Park also had bowling greens where lawn bowling could take place, and you can see the little pavilion and a few bowling greens both sides of the centre corridor. And they also had, as you see on the right, a tennis courts area. So these were great recreational pursuits for the people of Govan. Govan's Elder Park also had a boating pond, which is still in some fashion today. And there you can see the hobby of model yacht sailing. And that was very popular, not just in Elder Park, but throughout the city of Glasgow. Clubs were formed where people would, mainly at weekends, would go onto the ponds in the park and they would sail model sailing boats. And it also had a wee bit of a zoo, as you can see. And there's an amazing photograph of llamas from South America living in Govan, which is a great thing. There's a lot of sculpture around Govan. It actually punches well above its weight against most districts. It's got some fantastic sculpture. And this is the fairly recently unveiled sculpture to Mary Barber, who was the great crusader for rent strikes and justice. And there you see Mary at the front holding her hand aloft, and she's been followed by her supporters and their families. And on the right-hand side, you see a close-up version of the wee boy, and he's carrying a placard which states that we want justice. And Mary Barber was a wonderful woman who fought for the justice of rents being hiked up during the First World War by landlords while the men were away fighting, and she managed to put paid to that. The iconic fountain at Govan Cross is the Aitken fountain, and it was named after Dr. John Aitken, who was a local worthy. And the fountain was crafted by Denny over on the Falkirk area. And it was, again, recently refurbished and repainted, and it looks absolutely terrific. And there were quite a number of these types of canopy drinking fountains throughout the city. And the Govan version certainly is still holding very good indeed. And that was to the worthy, as I say, John Aitken, and it was by the inhabitants of Govan they sponsored it. Here we see John Elder, the shipyard owner that I mentioned, and he was a powerhouse in industrial terms, a big employer with the shipyard on the Clyde, and he led a very colourful life, and he died at a fairly young age. In which, after that, his wife Isabella Elder had to temporarily look after the company, but she went on in her own respect. And here we see Isabella, and she became a great benefactor to the Govan district. On the left, we see a posed photo in a salon, a photographic salon with Isabella with her dress on, looking fine with a little parasol, keep the sun off her, trying to mimic that. And perhaps the nicest thing for Isa was the statue in Elder Park, which you can see today. And it's a beautiful statue. And I only have one criticism of it, is at the base, it doesn't say Isabella Elder. She's identified as Mrs. John Elder. So strange in times now that we look at that through different eyes. I hope you've enjoyed this very quick tour of Govan. There's lots more to Govan's history than I've been able to give you today, but I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much.